Hey there, Niner faithful. Jonnydel here. You're watching The Jonnydel Show. Today, we have a very special guest coming on. It is John Chapman from the 49ers Rush podcast. If you don't know who John is, you need to go check his stuff out. I will have a link in the description below, but he has been one of the best content creators in the 49ers universe for a number of years now. And he was gracious enough a couple weeks ago to bring me on his show, and we did a little collaboration. I had a great time. He's a great guy to talk to, super nice, really knowledgeable, and is just putting out some great stuff. And we just had a great time. So we said, you know what, we need to do this again. And so he was gracious enough to come on my show. And so here we are. This is going to be our conversation. If you would like to just listen to this episode, I will have a link in the description for where you can find it on Spotify or just a direct link for a download. But you're watching Jonnydel's Football Academy. Well, here he is, the man himself, John Chapman. We were able to bump paths a couple weeks ago. I came on your podcast. You were gracious enough to bring me on your show. And, you know, I want to say, I first noticed your channel. You start doing some stuff a couple years ago. It was or I guess about 3 years ago now, in 2019. That's when I started doing some stuff, and it was like I would open my YouTube app, and I kept getting these tabs, these recommended videos on the side from a guy, John Chapman. I was like, I don't know who this guy is. I checked him out. I was like, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about. He knows what he's doing, and so I just want to give some people who maybe haven't had a chance to see you before. What is your channel all about? Where can they find you? And what got you into the creator space?
Yeah, so John Chapman, the show's 49ers Rush, which is probably the best place to find everything, whether it's audio, YouTube, all of our film breakdowns. We have a little different flavor, which I love because Johnny's going to go, like, you go in like 5 levels. You're Inception level 5, right? My background, I'm a former coach. So I coached for over a decade at one of the largest programs in the country in Texas, which was incredible. And I loved it. And that was my career trajectory. Um, Family, we decided to become foster parents. My wife and I adopted some boys, which was awesome, but I needed to spend more time at home. And so I shifted my focus from coaching to teaching and podcasting. So the whole idea was, all right, what if I bring a coaching kind of approach to film in the 49ers? And so after every single game, we would sit down with the team, whether offense or defense, and we would go through each play and we would show, like, okay, here's positive, here's negative. This is why this play didn't work. Here's the scheme. This is what we missed. This is what worked well. And so that's the same approach, just because that's what I know, that I try to bring to 49ers fans. So very similar to you, educating, helping increase the fan experience. We're a positive show for the most part, but doesn't mean we don't bring criticism to the 49ers and choices and players. But we're not clickbait. That's not who I really am. That's not who I want to be. I want to build community. I want to hang out, and I want people to have a better time pulling for the 49ers. So that's kind of our story in a nutshell.
And you know, that's something I've always appreciated about your channel, is the positivity side of it. It's really easy to be negative, to be the shouter, to be the clickbait, as you say. You know, I went to turn on the TV for my daughters. They were home sick yesterday, and ESPN was popped up, still on my satellite, and it was one of the morning football shows, and literally these guys are just yelling at each other the whole time. I mean, it starts to sound like cable news networks, where it's all about shouting and being angry and making a louder point. And I've appreciated that it's more level-headed from you. You keep the positivity, and it's not all you have to make horrible news to attract news, you know, if that makes any sense, and
Right.
attract conversation. I think that there is a higher level of dialogue that we can get to that is beyond just shouting at each other, just taking sides, digging in trenches, and fighting it out. I honestly think that's a lot of what has been contributing to the issues or the criticisms that we're seeing of Trey Lance. Really, I think there's such a polarization that that there's so much negative energy out there over Trey Lance. And honestly, I think some of that, and this is just my opinion, is some people are upset with how Jimmy Garoppolo was treated last year. of that there was never an excuse, there was never an understanding. It was always he was the source of all the woes. Um, and so when this year comes around, those same people are going to turn around and say, "Well, you know what? I'm going to do the same thing that was done to Jimmy to Trey Lance,
Yep.
and to the next level, because it's now their turn to dogpile on somebody." And then you see people on the other side that were so for Trey Lance, they don't want to hear any criticism at all, and anything that's negative on Trey Lance just becomes overblown. And now, granted, there is a lot of negative press about Trey Lance right now. He didn't have the greatest performance last Sunday, but that doesn't mean his career shot. It doesn't mean that this is the end. I mean, it's his first game in a 17 game season in a month. I mean, you were there. Just kind of describe what the conditions were like there in Chicago.
It was a roller coaster, you know. We had pretty good seats, but we weren't under one of the overhangs, so we were getting dumped on right behind the 49ers bench.
Wow.
And it was up and down. So it started off really bad, cleared up a little bit, got worse. Then it was just like you can't see anything. You just couldn't see anything. Uh, and so it was interesting. I really did walk away from that game again live feeling like, okay, probably not the best game to evaluate a 22-year-old quarterback on the road. Were there positives? Yes. And whenever I went back through the film, I definitely walked away with a much more positive approach to Trey Lance's performance. I kind of walked away thinking, you know what? I don't think it was so much quote unquote Trey lost this game. I could not find that narrative or the film or the plays to support that. Did he play a perfect game? Did he do enough to win the game? I don't believe so either. But this entire team has been built. And Shanahan said repeatedly, it's Trey's team, but we're going to rely on our playmakers to get these wins. And we're going to rely on those things and manage Trey as he develops. But man, so many positives. And again, you turn on ESPN or any of that stuff. It's just whoa, 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 whoa. And I would argue, man, it's okay to like or love Jimmy Garoppolo and like or love Trey Lance. They're both 49ers quarterbacks. I don't understand why you have to quote unquote pick a side. I'm excited Trey Lance is the starter. I'm also excited Jimmy Garoppolo is the backup. There's a lot of football to be played. And so, like, if you're asking me a worry meter how I feel about Trey Lance, I'd say it might be a 2 out of 10. And that's might be a 1.4.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I honestly, I had the film once it hit the fourth quarter and you could barely see the players through the all 22. I was like, there's nothing of value here on Trey Lance. And like you said, there was a lot of positive things to see. I mean, there's rooms for improvement. That's what I phrased it that way in my breakdown video of these are opportunities for growth and there are room for improvement because he's so young. I mean, if he was 10 years in the league and this is something that he'd been doing, and you had 120 starts, and this is something that he was doing in start 3, and now at 120 starts, he was still doing that, that's when you see a red flag. That's when you're saying, okay, this is just who he is. He is nowhere close to this is who he is. I mean, Alex Smith in 2005 was not the Alex Smith that we saw later. And it took him years because I mean, now he had a horrible situation, but Alex was so raw coming out that he had never taken a snap from under center. And now all of a sudden he gets in Mike McCarthy's offense and he's taking a bunch of snaps under center while they're trying to run the ball. You know, it was ugly quick, and that did not define his career. Peyton Manning played horrible his first season and he learned a lot through that, and there's growing pains that are going to happen. And so I find it crazy that some people that should know better um are so quick to judge on him. You know, I don't know if you saw the clip of Mike Martz going off on Trey Lance. It was pretty rough. And I was sitting there going, okay, you're ready to write off a 22-year-old guy, but you went and had a guy that failed in Green Bay and then was in the Arena League that nobody wanted, and you ended up with him on your running the greatest show on turf. So who are you to judge, you know, what a guy looks like their first few times stepping out on the field?
He has a type. I mean, you're talking
Yeah.
Mark Bulger, you know, you go through the whole list. He likes those old-fashioned, strong-armed pocket presence quarterbacks, which would make sense why he doesn't like Trey.
Right.
because he does not fit that narrative. He is the new age quarterback that can kind of do everything, and he has to develop. You haven't seen the Bill Parcells, 18 plus games starting and 3 years and it's different. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, there is criticism that needs to be given to the 49ers for doing something different than what the status quo has been in the NFL. But to judge a the second youngest quarterback rostered in the NFL after one game during a damn hurricane, come on, man. Like, that's low hanging fruit. You got to
Yeah.
wait and see. You got to wait and see.
Absolutely. And, like you said, he really likes that 5-7 step drop guy who's going to be, the footwork is tied in all the way. And it's just that pure, deep drop back passer, which Trey's not that guy. I mean, I don't imagine him. When you look through Kyle's playbook, you don't see a lot of 7-step drops. You see a lot when you look through Mike Martz's playbook. They're just different styles of quarterback, and that's why I've always looked at it and gone, okay, yeah, whatever. That's your opinion. That's your opinion for how Trey would be in your offense, not who Kyle wants Trey to be in his offense. They're gonna be different. There are different things that they're trying to do. But
I'm willing to take a bet with Mark Martz over who has a better career, Mark Bulger or Trey Lance. I'll give him whatever odds he wants. And so if he wants to double down on that one, he can name his price. I'm in.
Fair enough. So, one thing I know that really does help a young quarterback, though, is when your receivers really show up and they show out and they elevate their performance. A good receiver is a young quarterback's best friend. It was, Josh Allen really, really ascended when they got him a true X receiver, in my opinion. That's when you started to see defenses were playing their pass game differently because they had to. They suddenly had a guy that you could isolate and he was going to win every time. And I think we drafted Brandon Aiyuk to be that guy. When you look at Deebo Samuel, I love Deebo Samuel, and he's a guy that you can use in a lot of different ways. He reminds me of a more explosive Anquan Bolden. That Anquan Bolden was a guy that you had no problem putting him inside where he was going to be making catches in traffic. He was a classic Z receiver. He was going to be on the tight end side where it was going to be working concepts versus zones and things where he may be running into a linebacker coming in on a dig route, but he can handle it and he could do things with the ball in his hand. Deebo reminds me a lot of that, but more has a higher top end speed. When Deebo hits that final gear, he's gone. And so that's what Deebo reminds me of. Aiyuk, to me, needs to be that Larry Fitzgerald type that's going to be that true X receiver that when we're in our 21 personnel, you can put Brandon Aiyuk isolated away from the tight end, one-on-one with a corner, and he's going to win. And that will change the way that defenses have to play us. So for you, with what you've seen with Brandon Aiyuk over the years, what do you think that he needs to do to really elevate himself to be one of those true X receivers, a true number one, a guy that will be our biggest threat in the pass game against corners?
I think two things, and I'm not even going to put them on him. I think he's ready. I think he's there. His offseason was better than anybody's. You look at what he did during training camp and preseason, like he has passed the test. I think two things will help him out probably more than most things. One, George Kittle coming back changes the way in which the safety over the top will be filtered to Aiyuk's side versus, again, that, the Deebo Kittle side, which even though we shift our tight ends around a lot, every single tight end is going to be looking at 85 first. And then that's going to help, especially single high man coverage, things like that. That's where Aiyuk has to be successful. So that brings me to my second thing. Trey Lance identifying man concepts early pre-snap. That's what we got to see. Jimmy Garoppolo never threw it outside the numbers deep. We saw two passes versus the Bears, one to Croft that was overthrown, and Trey wishes he had that one back. I would argue if that was George Kittle running the route, that's a walk-in touchdown. But I digress. Got to put it on Trey, be honest. But then the second play that is not getting much play was a wheel route from Juwan Jennings, which was right on the money. And nobody's talking about that play. And so we've seen him hit those outside the numbers. Now, Aiyuk only had 2 targets in the Chicago game, which I hate, and both were in between the numbers, which I also hate. He hit the high level crosser on that one for like 35 yards. You've got to be a little bit more purposeful in getting the ball to number 11, because I'm with you. Trey and him, simpatico, man. Their strengths align, right? It's like a Venn diagram. Like, it's just they're match made in heaven. You just got to get Trey's processing pre-snap up, and George Kittle's going to help that dramatically. We really need George Kittle back this week, and I'm pretty sure he is going to go. That's just a gut instinct. I think that we'll see him in a blue contact jersey probably on Thursday, and I think he'll be good to go on Sunday. I could eat my words on that, but I do think that Kittle's going to be out there this week for Seattle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think exactly what you're saying is Trey's ability to be able to identify the man pre-snap, and not from just the defined looks. Kyle has been really good at giving defined looks over the years by shifts and formations. Like he'll put use check out wide or a running back out wide, and you see a corner on him. Okay, that's zone. And then he's going to motion him inside, and we'll run our offense. And he does this as dummy moves every once in a while, because you can't just do it when you're going to pass, or else you say, well, yeah, we're showing what your defense is so we can pass it. But doing things like that. But there's other times where you have to be able to not do that, run your run game motions, and then be able to throw out of that. And that's where your quarterback has got to be able to identify what the coverage is going to be. And the Bears, to their credit, a few times did do some really nice disguises, very similarly to what I've seen from the Rams a few years that they started doing against Kyle Shanahan, where they would present a zone look and knowing that Kyle is going to shift. You know that Kyle's going to shift. And so once, it's almost like they say, well, let's show this defense. Once they shift, we're going to go into our actual defense. And because Kyle's doing motion like 86% of the time, it's just an ungodly amount of shifting. So you can almost assume like he's going to shift in motion. And so you can use that against him. And like I saw a play down near the goal line where they did that. They had a linebacker over Aiyuk. We motioned Jennings across, a corner widens. It looks like zone. They end up running man. And we had a little stick concept to the left, and Trey just didn't recognize that his eyes were kind of in the wrong spot. And so he doesn't see, because you can see we had the running back out of the backfield, and the linebacker immediately attacks him, jams him, so he can't run his option route there. And they were in man. I mean, it was very clear once you could see it. But Trey, he's looking at that pre-snap motion, and he goes, okay, it's zone. And so he looks over here, doesn't like what he sees. He goes to the other side, and he's looking for a now route, but that help defender being cover one is right there in the throwing lane, and he has to eat a sack. And those are the things you want, which will come. I mean, I doubt at North Dakota State that he saw a lot of teams bluffing zone coverage pre-snap and running man coverage post-snap. I mean, that's just not something that you really see at North Dakota State. That's not
less than half the teams do it in the NFL.
Right. I mean, it's not that common, and so that's a good learning rep for him. That's what a lot of the early season is going to be. And it's like what you said, that there's going to be growing pains. There's going to be things that he just hasn't even seen before, that he's never ever seen before. And so the team has to be good enough around him to weather through that you can't expect a guy that has never repped versus this look, or only ever seen it on paper, to go out and execute it perfectly. You just can't expect that. But so the team really has to rally around and say, look, we can be really good week 15, but we have to make it to week 19. Like that's, so there has to be this collective effort that says that. And I didn't see that collective effort in Chicago. There was mistakes everywhere. Like you said, it was not on Trey Lance. Now, again, did he play perfectly? No, but we had wide receivers blowing blocks. We had linemen blowing blocks. And the thing that was more frustrating me was that in the run game, is that we were blowing a lot of blocks in the run game. It was like you saw chance after chance after chance.
And it was everybody. It wasn't
it was everybody.
You could single out, a couple players. I think Jake Brindle had a pretty bad game. But, Aaron Banks, who I thought played very, very well, he stopped one of the touchdown runs. Juwan Jennings, who was probably the best 49er player on the field collectively for the game, he was incredible run blocking, blew another running assignment that stopped a touchdown as well in the goal line. So football, there's so many freaking snaps, right? You're getting 60 plus snaps and you could be great for 58 of them, but that's where Mike McGlinchey comes in. It has just two Mike McGlinchey-esque plays that kill drives and take points off the board. Well, he was great for 58. All right, that's great, but what about these other two? And when those start stacking, that is the symptoms of a bad football team. When good players stack bad plays. And that's what I think the 49ers kind of have to overcome, whether that's penalties, blown assignments, drop balls, fumbles, right? Debo fumbling the ball inside the red zone. Mike McGlinchey, even the great Trent Williams, who was incredible. But I would argue, man, maybe one of my least favorite Trent Williams games in the past couple of years, but it was still good. I mean, it was great, but bad plays are going to happen. You can't let them stack. And whenever they do stack, it looks bad on Trey, and he's bailing people out. You brought up earlier, fourth quarter, whenever it just monsooned, I thought two of Trey Lance's best throws of the entire game were during the monsoon. One was dropped by Debo. The other one was caught, I believe, by Croft or Dwelly over the middle. But, like, he had some great throws, even in that mush. But other players kind of took it away. You even had a Kyle Juszczyk drop during that time. So, I don't know, man. Eventually, the studs got to start bailing out the young, experienced quarterback instead of hindering. And so it's small sample size. So I don't want to jump too much into that, but there's a lot of positives. O-line needs some work.
Yeah, because I remember, and I remember seeing one play, and it was just shocking me that Trent Williams got pancaked. It was a run play. I don't know if you saw that one. Like, he got straight pancaked, and I went, "What in the world?" Like, you never see Trent Williams get pancaked. It reminded me a lot of some of the stuff we started seeing with the Harbaugh team in 2014. Now, I'm not going to speak that over this team, but I remember when I was watching a lot of the film that year in 2014, we went 8-8 and we were struggling so much. And that was a team that had been so good for so long. And one of the problems I remember keep seeing was that it wasn't like you had 11 guys all making a ton of mistakes. You had one guy making a couple mistakes on these plays, and then one guy stacking a couple mistakes, and then and it was to where, like you say, when you have 65 snaps in a game, if each guy makes two mistakes and they're all on like 5 or 6 plays, well, you can weather that. And those are some bad drives. That happens when you start when those guys are all staggering their mistakes and they're all ruining plays. Now you're talking 40 plays in the game where something bad's happening, where somebody's not doing their job, and it's messing it up. And because I remember that a lot during the 2014 season. One play would be Upati, and another play would be Alex Boone, and another play it would be Joe Staley, and another play would be I can't remember who our receivers all were at that time, like Crabtree. Like there would just be all these guys, they would stagger their mistakes. And that's a lot of what I saw with Chicago, was that it wasn't like one play you're having the entire right side of the line mess up. You have one guy, and then the next play, another guy, and then the next play, another guy. And this was just a story throughout the game. And so it's one of those that it gives you a little bit of hope, but it's like you say, sometimes that's the things that bad teams do. And we're not a bad team, but if it continues, then we are. But I think they will clean it up, and I think it's going to be something, you've seen that standard, that high standard held. This isn't the first time we've seen things like this. I mean, we started last year 3-5 and then ended up in the NFC Championship game. It's not going to say you can dig yourself in a hole every year and get out, but more the makeup of the team is one that has a high standard of accountability, and they perform generally pretty well. So with talking about the offensive line, I've seen a narrative going around that is that Trey just was under duress the whole time, and that the O-line played horrible, and there's been a lot thrown on them. And some people who say, I watched the film and the O-line just looked terrible. I didn't see really in the past game a terrible game from the O-line. I didn't see a great game, but I didn't see one that I went, oh man, because we talked about that on your show a couple weeks ago, my concerns about the O-line. What did you see from the offensive line?
I thought, okay, Couple things. The offensive line hasn't played together. This is literally their first time, right? You got 3 new starters inside. Trent Williams wasn't around much. Mike McGlinchey was injured almost the whole thing. So they're still trying to this quote unquote gel. The offensive line needs a gel. You hear that a lot, right? It hasn't existed. Okay. So they're learning on the fly. Number two, when the offensive lineman loses a rep, it's not as black and white as like, oh, you just got Trey Lance killed, which didn't happen. There was one sack given up the entire game, and that was on Mike McGlinchey. The other sack, I would say, like you brought up earlier, that was much more on Trey Lance's vision. He didn't see it right, and so he had to eat a sack. The problem with it, whether we're looking, let's just use Jake Brindle. He would lose a rep early, and he's given up a pressure through one of the A gaps. However, because of his athleticism, he regathers so well. And so he is able to kind of rescind and get back in front of the defensive tackle or linebacker or whomever and cut off their trajectory, but they're 3.5 yards in the backfield. So now Trey has to sidestep, keep his eyes downfield, and a lot of those were rushing scrambles. But it's not like they're just getting like whiffed and Trey's getting killed back there. I didn't see that. But with Banks, with Burford, and I think with Brindle, our 3 interior guys, hyper athleticism, maybe a little less so with Banks, but they've got to learn the nuances to not lose early and stop this. Let's save the rep and develop that clean pocket. Because if you're just assessing, okay, was there a clean pocket for Trey to stand in there and throw it? Yeah, I would say that narrative is correct. That did not exist much in the game. But I think you have to give this, let's spin it to a positive. Trey Lance's pocket presence, I thought, was immaculate almost this game. He dodged so many pressures and was able to keep his eyes downfield or scramble. He had 6 rushing first downs. I don't want him taking that many hits, but yeah. I don't know. I didn't walk away from this thinking it was a bad, quote unquote, performance from the offensive line. If you wanted to say that, again, Jake Brindle, I thought I had a bad game. Other than that, man, no, I don't think Banks and I don't think Burford, I'd give them a thumbs up this game. I was very, very well pleased with their performance.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. You'd see like Burford, for example, or Banks would get beat early, and some of it just looked like in unfamiliarity with the scheme. It looked like a couple plays that he's expecting center help, he's not getting center help. That's something that they got to clean up between their communication. Between
you saw Trent yell at Banks on one play. It was during a run play. Afterwards, before the film cut off, he's like, "Dude, what are you doing?"
Yeah,
and those are going to happen because they just don't have the repetitions yet. They're not there yet.
Yeah, there was one play I showed it on my video that we're running a play action pass. Trent moves, comes down on inside on the fake as if they're going to fake the run, and Banks goes left and they bump into each other, and he's trying to drop back and he trips over Trent's foot, and now there's a pressure. He gathered himself and he does kind of push the lineman, but it causes pressure, and Trey's going to be then running after that. So that's not a problem of bad technique. It's not a problem of not being strong enough. It's a problem of not knowing 100% what you're doing, which just is time on task. And it's one reason I really don't like that we're now down to 3 preseason games, because those young guys would be getting more reps during the preseason, and they would be getting more chances to iron out some of these issues. But the NFL said that they wanted a better product. So we have the 17th game, because I look at so many games, first games of the season from so many teams, and they just look sloppy. And you're sitting there going, okay, you gave us a better preseason game, but a worse regular season game. Okay, it wasn't
NFL
about getting
just
better product.
cares about those TVs, man. That's really all it comes down to. Nobody watches preseason games except for us crazy people. But yeah, I hate that it's always like that.
It is. So I guess taking this into, what do you want to see from the offensive line going forward? What to you, next week coming in, what do you want to see across the board look better?
I want to see the sustained blocks. When you're watching film and, you can go for a count and a half and then you pause it and you're like, okay, let's break this down from a coaching standpoint. And you see like, okay, your hat's in the right place. You've gotten to the second level. The scoop block here is working well. And I thought a lot of times that it looked really good in the running game. But once you got to that second count, second and a half count, man, falling off blocks. And this is a problem with more athletic linemen. You can get there, you got to sustain. So, especially when Jeff Wilson came in, because Jeff Wilson is going to give you what you give him. He's not breaking tackles. He's not outrunning guys to the edge. That's not who he is. He's going to do everything the coaches want you to do. That's why he gets so much playing time, and especially the stuff without the ball, which Shanahan talked about this week. But as far as just a purely run game, which is what I want to focus on, because that's how the Niners are going to win this division if they are going to win this division, you have to sustain those blocks for more than 2.5 counts to allow people like Jeff Wilson Jr. to get those 7, 8+ yard runs. He had 2.5 yards per carry. That ain't going to work with a running back one in the 49ers with a young quarterback and a young offensive line. How do you remedy that? Sustain those blocks long term. We know Trent can do it. We know McGlinchey can do it. That's what McGlinchey's best at, probably. It's those 3 interior guys. Sustain the block. And again, I think I'm becoming a little bit of a bully here. Jake Brendel was the worst of the group. Banks is the best of the group at that. So if we can get Spencer Burford, the rookie, and Jake Brendel to elevate those sustained blocks, Kittle coming back will help as well. He's just that magic potion that you put in whatever the hell you're making. It's barbecue sauce, right? You got crappy food. You're from the South, Johnny.
Oh, yeah.
You got crappy food, man. You just put some spicy barbecue on there. Oh, I'm happy. Oh, this is great, Grandma. I love it. But without Kittle, that's dry chicken. You don't want dry chicken.
No. No. And I will say, I live an hour and a half from Tuscaloosa. The original Dreamland barbecue. You see it. If you ever watch The Tide, they always show the shack. It is literally a shack out up in the outskirts of Tuscaloosa. I have been there, and it is all worth the hype, and you can get their barbecue sauce online. They're not sponsoring me, so this is just a free thing. Their barbecue sauce is off the chain good. But you're 100% right. Jeff Wilson is a guy, like you say, he's not going to be the guy that makes a lot of people miss, but he's a home run hitter if you give him the lane. He's got that breakaway speed. That's something that Shanahan loves in running backs. He wants a home run hitter. He doesn't want to get that perfect run block set up and then your running back just not have the burst and the speed to make it pay off. He wants explosives in the run game. And I honestly think that's one reason why Carlos Hyde never stuck around with him, because he wasn't that home run hitter. He was a guy who was going to be really good, to get you consistent yardage most of the time. He's a bigger back, but he wasn't that home run hitting guy that if you hit that crease, boom, he was gone. That was a Mostert. That's what he loved about Mostert. That was a Breida. We saw those. That's what Tevin Coleman was. He was a guy that wasn't necessarily great at making people miss, but he was a home run hitter. And that if you set it up, they're gone. And so, looking with the loss of Elijah Mitchell, like you said, Shanahan talked about young guys being able to come in and perform without the ball in their hands. And that's something that I think as fans we look at and is wildly overlooked. Because I know I had several people ask me this week, why didn't Danny Gray play? He's that receiver that was supposed to be the deep threat and would really pair well with Lance's big arm. And my assumption, I don't have an inside source, but I'm just looking at it and thinking, with what we saw from what the receivers were tasked in the run game, to me it screams not performing when the ball's not in your hands. That's my assumption.
Saw that with Aiyuk last year, right?
Right. And it was when Aiyuk really stepped up his run blocking that we started to see more integration and more things happening. So to me, because people are like, well, just put him in when you're going to throw it. Well, then you're telegraphing that you're going to throw it. We saw that with Benjamin last year. He was our speed guy, but he never saw the field. Well, when you would watch him block, you saw why. He'd get bowled over and when they would try and have block somebody. So, kind of from a coach's perspective, how important is it for those running backs to be able to perform without the ball in their hand? And what does that mean? Kind of break it down for us as a fan, what that means when a coach is saying that.
The reason why Jeff Wilson Jr. is what he is for Kyle Shanahan is because, and you alluded to this earlier in this show, where you motion him out wide and you start in an empty formation, then you motion him back, right? The running back to try to figure out if it's man or zone, and you're trying to help your quarterback. You have to be able to get those things. You also have to be able to pick up blitz protection, which is the number one reason why rookie running backs across the NFL, not just with the 49ers, you get that quarterback hit, you're out. Now, I will say this, both TDP and Jordan Mason were incredible in pass pro at the college level, but it is a little bit different going to the NFL. Now, this week, Kyle Shanahan chose not to let Jordan Mason get any snaps on offense. He was just special teams only. And I thought he played really well, and I thought that holding call against him was not a very good call from the official, but I digress. You have to get carries to one of those rookie running backs this week, if not both. Kyle Shanahan said he's going to ride the hot hand, and that's exactly what I want. Jeff Wilson Jr. is going to be RB1. I want them to switch series. This is what, again, if John Chapman, rosy cheek guys coaching this game, I'm going Jeff Wilson, you got first series. Jordan Mason, you got second series. TDP, you got third series. Whoever does the best, you get the fourth series. And we're just going to keep going that way. Allow this to be a meritocracy. Allow it to be. Now, the other things, again, the blocking, the blitz pickup, the lining up correctly. And it's even more difficult for a 49ers running back because now you got Debo back there. So it's not just your running assignments. You have to be a fullback for Debo. And Jeff Wilson's at his best at that. The one thing that Jeff Wilson does so well, it's not the biggest drop off from Kyle Juszczyk that most people think. Like, he's that damn good of a lead blocker.
Good.
He blocks with his feet, he blocks behind his pads, and he attacks. He does not hesitate at all. Can they do that? Because let's be honest, Debo's really running back one moving forward till Elijah Mitchell gets back, which is months. That's months away.
Absolutely. Well, man, I appreciate you coming on so much. If you had 1 minute to kind of preview or break down what you think is going to happen versus the Seahawks, okay? And I don't know about you, but the ire I have for the Seahawks is
It's yep. We're there, my friend.
okay.
We're there, my friend.
I used to live outside Seattle, okay,
Oh,
and I have been to games at their field. I was at the worst game we ever. Oh, you can see I'm having a hard time even talking about it. I was at the game where it was,
PTSD is real.
yeah, I was at the game where we were shut out, and it was the first time the 49ers were shut out for 27 years. Okay. I was at that game. It was in 2004. It was in Seattle. And so I have no endless hate for the Seahawks. 1 minute. What do you think is going to happen? What do you expect us to do?
I expect a much more complete game. The problem last week was defense was great, then defense was bad second half. First half, offense was great, just couldn't cash it in. Then they were bad the second half. Literally, I don't think the bar is high. You don't need much. Complementary football, special teams was on point the whole entire freaking game. I think the 49ers established a lead early. I think they maintained that. I do have the 49ers winning by more than a touchdown, not double-digit points like Vegas is saying, though.
Well, that is good news for fans to hear. Well, guys, this has been John Chapman. Seek him out at 49ers Rush. He's got way more Twitter followers than I do, so jump over there. He's got a great show. Follow his stuff, man. He is doing some phenomenal stuff. If you like my stuff, you will love his stuff. So thank you, John, for coming on.
Appreciate it, man. Love what you do. Keep it up, man.
Oh, but as always, stay safe and stay healthy, and go Niners.